Hey, what's up? This is Ian from Vetrepreneur. I am here with CEO and founder Mike Murphy of ProctorFree. Mike, what's up?
Hey, Ian. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So we want to talk to Mike about his story as a vetrepreneur, about his company ProctorFree, his experience in the military, and some of the cool stuff that they're working on. And so I guess let's get right into it, Mike. What'd you do in the military?
So I joined the New York National Guard when I was a teenager, and around that time was when we invaded Iraq. So we were mobilized and deployed as a Guard unit. So we almost immediately went to active duty. So from about May 2004 to November 2005, almost 2 years, 1 year, 7 months, I was an all-source intelligence analyst. So that was kind of my start in the military. So I was trained as an intelligence analyst, and that was my first deployment. That's the job that I had.
So what was your first job out of the military? Did you know you wanted to get out? Did you know you wanted to be in entrepreneurship?
So there was about 6 years where 6 or 7 years where I was either kind of deployed in the National Guard, either with New York or the Virginia Guard, or working as a DoD contractor. So my first job after that deployment was going right to DC to work as an intelligence analyst. So I was doing almost an identical job in DC in a secure facility as to what I had just done when I was deployed. And I kind of went from general all-source intelligence analysis to biometric enabled intelligence, which was part of the overall counter IED effort. So I deployed twice as a soldier and called up to active duty, and then in between those deployments worked as a DoD contractor, and then eventually did a third deployment as a civilian as part of the overall counter IED effort.
So how long were you doing counter IED stuff? So it's like,
yeah, so probably about 1.5 years. I spent in Baghdad, so that was the third deployment. And again, there was a lot of different information that was flowing into the facility that I worked at, and I was still kind of a generalist that dealt with a bunch of different issues. But that was kind of my first foray into the field of forensics and biometrics as part of the overall counter ID mission.
and after you left that space, you made a conscious decision to say, "No, I want to do something a little different with my life. I appreciate this part." What was your thought process?
Yeah, so at that point, I'd spent about 6 or 7 years working with the same set of information. I was all focused around the Middle East. It was pretty stressful and frustrating at times. At that time when I left, our status of forces agreement had changed with Iraq. There was a lot of issues with recidivism, so someone would essentially be locked up, and then we'd find out later on that they were essentially back out on the streets. It was tough to track that information, so I started looking around, ended up back in the States, and I got linked up with another veteran-founded business. I really didn't know what they did at first, but I knew that there were two veterans that co-founded it, and my conversations with them were very comfortable, and they had a growing business. And we talked for months about how they thought my background as an intelligence analyst would apply well to either business development or marketing, and just generally be helpful to their companies. So I kind of took a leap of faith and moved down to North Carolina after several months of good conversation with these guys. And experience, I didn't realize that I was going to work for a startup. So the startup was called Everblue Training Institute, and what it was a for-profit school. And it wasn't clear to me that it was a startup. I just thought I joined a for-profit school, a business that was growing very fast. Within a few weeks, I was wearing a couple different hats. They paid for me to take some night courses, but I started to learn more about, what it's like to be in a civilian business again, what search engine optimization and search engine marketing was, how to manage, the front end of a website, deal with the e-commerce platform, and then handle your users in a learning management system. So I'd never been in for-profit education or education in general, but there were some things that were kind of comfortable to me once I was exposed to them.
That's super interesting because I've heard that story before, where taking an analyst and moving them into a role where it's very analytical. So marketing is an obvious fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how did you view, I mean, marketing and being an analyst are pretty similar, and obviously that played hugely into what you ended up kind of founding later on. But how is that transition going from, analyzing IEDs and troop movements and enemy contact to analyzing marketing lead generation?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a bit of a learning curve to start. I had no idea how search engines worked. I didn't understand how people get to a website or how do people find a product. I mean, as a consumer, I understand my personal process, but once I developed an understanding of our business and what we offered, and then kind of the different product lines, and some of it was kind of simple. There's a story to tell. So if a user buys one product, there's probably a period of time where you can follow up with them and see how it's going, or upsell them. Or for us, there was a natural story for some of the students where if they obtain this certification, well, part of their professional development is to either recertify on that or to go to the next level professional development. So some of that made sense to me, looking at user activity coming to the website, creating funnels. So you're getting someone to your website, you have a high bounce rate. Well, if it's high, that's bad. So how do you lower that? Is a page aesthetically pleasing? Do you have calls to action? And I did have to take some night courses, but I think if you're able to consume information or process it and develop an understanding of something, I mean, we had a mission there. It was kind of a mission-oriented business, and so some of it felt natural, some of it had a little bit of a learning curve, and if you just want to kind of work hard and pay attention, I think a lot of that stuff sorts itself out.
So did you decide to leave, or why'd you get out?
So so that company, or just
that company.
So that company grew rapidly, and again, I didn't understand at the time that it was I guess what you would refer to as a startup. They were growing year over year when I had joined them, and they continued to grow while I was there. And I quickly looked at the founders as mentors. At the time, we're very close now, but at the time it was just, these are my employers, they're mentors to me. There's a lot I can learn here. But they grew rapidly and were acquired by a Fortune 500 company. And I was very fortunate that one of the individuals that I worked at this school with is my current co-founder now. Her and I worked very well together. But when the founders sold the business and exited, it was kind of a pivotal moment in our lives. And it quickly turned to a little bit more corporate. It wasn't kind of as exciting. They were still on a good path. But we kind of looked at it and said, this is our opportunity to either go work for these founders again and go on another wild ride, or be mentored by them. So they had mentored both of us. And long story short, we eventually kind of settled around the idea of ProctorFree based on our experience there, and went through an incubator, won a state grant, raised investment funding. So we've been kind of following this path, but we basically decided to leave because we saw the business changing, not for the worse, it was for the better, but it was just going to be different, and we wanted to be challenged and be obsessed about what we were working on. So what was the kind of impetus to say we want to start our own thing and really shove off? And I guess take a step back and explain, hey, what is ProctorFree, and what problem do you solve? Yeah, so ProctorFree, we're a software as a service provider. We provide online proctoring software for anyone taking an online assessment or an online exam or test. So a typical customer of ProctorFree right now is in higher education. So a college or university that provides online courses, can't get to the campuses, they can't get to a brick and mortar facility, or it just doesn't make sense for the program. It's all online, but then you might have to pressure a student to get to a physical facility to have their exams proctored. So from a student standpoint, right before they go to take their exam, our software will launch. It's typically integrated with their learning management system, so wherever they're already familiar with going, and we pop up and they'll create a profile with us. We use some facial recognition, get some other measurements there, and then they credential against that pre-existing profile every time they go to take an exam, and we provide continuous identity verification during that exam and look for certain behaviors and then provide reports back to the faculty. We do have some customers outside of higher ed for corporate continuing education, but most of our business right now is in traditional higher ed. When Velvet Nelson is a co-founder and business partner, I remember the day Velvet and I were sitting on the couch at the home of one of our mentors and investors and advisors, and us, we're happy to mentor you. We don't know what we're going to do next. You can come work for us, of course. But it was really kind of an opportunity to say, yeah, sure, let's take a stab at this. And you go through the idea of the week phase. We set up a marketing LLC, just a consultancy, because that was something I was comfortable with. I think originally we were going to teach some classes using a similar business model on SEO and SEM, but we kept coming back to this challenge of verifying identities in an online environment, providing kind of secure assessment options. So at Everblue Training Institute, one of the things that happened there that was significant for the business was Velvet worked very hard to get us accredited. So what that means to kind of the layman is we're a .edu, and that's a really big deal when you become a .edu, especially if you're for-profit, because it basically means you've gone through a very thorough internal audit process, and some entity out there has said, yes, you've met all these standards to be a real school. When that happened, we had a lot of kind of compliance and regulatory pressure we needed to meet. And one of the things we kept coming back to was a student could go to that website, purchase a course from us, go through our e-commerce platform, and end up in our learning management system. And we didn't have a lot of controls or measures around who they were. And I had just come from a theater where, we were verifying identities all the time, and you're collecting biometric information. So I knew the technology was there. We knew that this problem existed, and then we started this long kind of bridge of meeting those two. So that was kind of the origin of ProctorFree. And then we did several months of market research, basically leveraging Velvet's contacts, because she came from higher education. She's worked in higher ed her entire career. So we were able to go out and talk to what would eventually be potential customers, but at the time we had nothing to sell, so it's a very easy conversation to have. Hi, this is who we are. This is a problem we want to solve. This is our idea. Are we crazy? Would you pay for something like this? What would it need to look like? And that was kind of the seed that got planted there.
Wait, so take one step back. So you didn't actually start ProctorFree originally. You started as a marketing consultancy?
Yeah, well, it was that was more of kind of just a placeholder.
Yeah.
So we had just come from this very effective business model of teaching live and online classes. I had taken some courses in SEO and SEM, and I was like, I think I could teach these better. Let's just use this business model and go out there and teach this stuff. But we kept coming back to the idea for ProctorFree is something that, we knew the problem exists. We knew the technology was there, but it was so frustrating to start with because you don't have the business model. You don't even know what the next step is. And I think initially it was the creature comfort of looking at, so not only doing marketing consulting, but Velvet, people would pay for her services to help set up schools. So we still get contacted from time to time, and people reach out to her to say, I want to start a certification. I want to start this type of a school. How do I get approved for GI Bill funding, or how do I start a school? So she is that type of a person where she could guide you through the process, but there's only one of Velvet. So it's hard to be a consultant in that space. So yeah, we did have a marketing LLC. I still do it as kind of a hobby, but the LLC shut down, and it's more kind of a pro bono, like personal hobby of mine.
So did you, when you and Velvet started talking about this, did you say, this kind of idea for ProctorFree seems like it makes a lot of sense. Let's go to an incubator. Let's go to an accelerator. How are we going to learn how to run a business? We have this idea that, we've kind of proven a little bit really needs to happen. We've worked for a company that would have used it. There's a lot of schools that we know would be interested in this. Like, we got to turn this idea into an actual business. What was the next thing you did?
Yeah. So I'll just, those two mentors were John and Chris Boggiano. They're brothers, West Point grads. They started that for-profit school with one other individual who we're still very close to. They were trying to kind of coach us through we had just come from what was a successful business. It was a kind of a mid-stage to a later stage startup. So we had some ideas about, you've got to have a presence online. We knew we needed to go out and continue to talk to people, look at the competitive landscape. But no, the idea for the incubator didn't jump out. It was recommended to us because we were here in Charlotte. John and Chris had done some networking, but we were eventually introduced to a program called RevTech Labs, which is based in a building that used to be known as Packard Place in Charlotte. It's now called HQ, Headquarters Charlotte. And it's kind of an entrepreneur's hub here in the city. And it was safe because it was local. There was no cost. It just cost our time. But it certainly wasn't something that was going to hurt us or set us back. We didn't have a product yet. So we applied to this incubator program, and I think they're great. There's a lot of them out there now. But it's really whatever you're willing to put into it, you can get something positive out of it. So we got to practice our pitch a lot. We expanded our network a little bit. We had a different name at the time. We were called My Learning ID. But the culmination of that incubator experience was, a demo day where you pitch in front of a couple hundred people, which is always nice. It helps you continue to kind of get your word out there. But they exposed us to a state grant called NC Idea. And NC Idea is a pool of money, basically, and they have 2 cycles a year where if you're a North Carolina business or willing to kind of be a North Carolina business, you can apply to win state grant funding that isn't tied to equity. So we had applied to NC Idea. Long story short, we ended up winning in that grant cycle, and that also introduced us to our first seed investors. So we came out of this program at demo day being able to announce, hey, we just won a substantial grant. And we were kind of starting the process of looking at getting investment funding. So, going into the incubator, we didn't know what we were going to get out of it, but it was certainly a positive kind of launch pad for us.
So were you looking for funding, or were you looking to bootstrap? Like what did you even know that you were looking for a seed round?
No, we didn't know that at first. We thought we might be able to bootstrap. But again, early on, you really don't know. Some people can guide you. There's different versions of playbooks and advice that you'll get. But we knew at some point we needed to develop a product, and that had to be paid for, right? So initially, we did engage with a firm to build out kind of a concept or like an MVP architecture document of what the product would be. But we quickly had backed out of that because right around the same time we won the grant. We knew we needed a CTO. I don't have a computer science background. I'm technical for a layman or kind of a generalist, but we needed someone technical in the company. So how are you going to pay for this, right? So you don't have revenue, you don't have a product, you're about to win a grant, but I think it was kind of a natural process to raise investment funding because again, if you don't have cash on hand that you're willing to invest personally, you've got to get some money to create a runway to hire employees and to kind of start the business and keep it going.
Did you find that kind of throughout the process, you and your co-founder are looking at other opportunities across the country to say, how do we get the word out there? Or are you like kind of in the lab focusing on, building out the technical product for, after you go through that incubator and get your seed money?
Yeah, so getting the word out there is challenging, especially for higher education. So for good reason, higher education moves at its own cycle. So, some people, I'm still learning the academic calendar. It's funny, like I'm used to business quarters, but someone will say like fall semester, that starts in August and ends in December. So like naturally that stuff never makes sense to me. And then some schools have like trimesters. So, and then some schools have different funding cycles, but for whatever reason,
July is buying time.
Amazing. So, Velvet, we have other people here that come from education. They have educator backgrounds and it's natural for them, but so when you're trying to go out and talk to a large school and you don't even have a product, that's very challenging. So there's a lot of posturing that takes place early on. So we went out and we did a bunch of market research, right? And then we went through kind of the hurdles of closing that initial round of funding and finding a technical resource, someone that we hired in-house. But it's still challenging. Like it's hard to do sales and business development at that point. And I think that, Velvet would be able to speak better to this. It was probably very frustrating for her to make calls, right? And to do outbound efforts when you don't really have anything. So one of the things that I benefited from selfishly was I was able to kind of put my head down and put my marketing hat on. So I established a website. I focused on SEO. I hired some freelance writers to get content on the website. So I had this churn for many months where, 4 to 5 times a month, I'm getting new content up there. So if you go back and look at our site early on, the tone has changed from time to time. We wrote some content internally. We had freelance writers help us with that, but we're writing about things 3 years ago that really aren't necessarily relevant now, but as our markets change. So on one hand, I'm doing the SEO stuff. That's the foundation before we go out and we do what's called go to market. Then we got to a point where our MVP, we kind of looked at the timeline of when our MVP was going to be done, and we said we're going to go to market around this date. So our go to market strategy was twofold. We knew the MVP was coming along, so there was a point in time, a very clear point in time of October of 2013, where we went to market. Which is, we've done all this stuff in the background. We've kind of been putting feelers out there and probing, but now we're going to attend industry conferences and we're going to advertise online. So now that's the search engine marketing part. So we've done the SEO, now we're doing the SEM, and that hasn't stopped. So from that point on, we've attended industry conferences and done online advertising. We've done some other creative things, but that's the gist of it. And it's easier now when you have a product to go out and make calls. Because you'll learn a lot. You hear different feedback from the market. Well, do you integrate with this platform? Can you do this? Can you do that? And if you hear enough of it, it helps you kind of distill down what features are important and kind of the roadmap of what your product needs to continue to look like.
One of the things that veteran entrepreneurs struggle the most with is pricing, just because they've never owned a product before, obviously, but they've definitely never dealt with pricing, whether it's usually buying or selling due to the nature of the military. So how did you kind of approach getting past pricing or maybe it wasn't something that was kind of difficult for you in Velvet?
Yeah, it's challenging, and it's something we still talk about on a regular basis. I don't know that, so the value of something is what someone will pay for it, right? And if you have comparables on the market, you can look at that. So first of all, you have to figure out what is your cost to produce this product. So you've got fixed and variable costs. That's always important to know, and that takes a long time to dial that in. What does it actually cost me to maintain this product at a certain scale, whether it's per hour, per month, the fixed resources, and then the things that fluctuate. And then, what is the cost of labor with that? So that helps you determine what price you need to have to be profitable. At some point, you have to make more money than you're spending to create and offer this service. But we went out and looked at comparables in the market. We listened to feedback from schools. It's challenging, So is it going to be school pay or student pay? That makes a difference. Some schools push the burden of the cost onto the students. Some schools assume the burden of the cost. Some schools are, they have a different academic calendar. They may or may not have financial resources to pay for this. They may be paying for it out of like a special pool of money. So that's where, having co-founder like Velvet, and we have other education experts on board, they really help us kind of navigate that, because I might naively go out to 5 schools and think that the conversation is going to be the same when they're not. These schools have different sizes. One of them's, a state institution. They might have different needs. They might have different concerns. Some schools prefer to have things negotiated at the system level, and then they get to use that pricing. So it's something that we still look at on a regular basis. What is the market dictating? What are our costs to produce it? What do we need to be profitable? We're not trying to hit a home run on any one partnership. You want these to be recurring partnerships, but it is a huge challenge. But I would advise people to try to understand what your costs are going to cost for you to be profitable, and then look at the market, whether it's comparing other competitors or what the value of something is what someone will pay for it if you're just starting out on day one.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your customer approach.
As far as so I mean, like, I'll just talk about our go-to-market strategy. That was twofold. So we attend industry conferences that are relevant to us, and some of those conferences are themed, so you kind of know what to expect. We try to present at some of those conferences, but really it's tough to gauge like how many people you're going to meet at any individual event. So we try to that we meet and nurture them, and then if it's inbound. We have a process where we use a customer relationship management tool that's very common called Salesforce. We're getting better at it as time goes on, but early on you use a lot of freemium tools, and you don't have all the correct measurements set up. But if an inbound lead comes in, there's an automatic process that starts their input into our CRM. Someone on our team is following up with them. They're qualifying or disqualifying them as a lead, because not every lead is going to be good business for you. And then there's kind of a nurturing demo and onboarding process for that. Outbound efforts, some more of the hunting versus farming, is a little more challenging. So we draw up campaign plans internally, goals are for this marketing or sales campaign. And you want to make sure that your sales efforts are aligned with what your product actually does, so that you're targeting the best types of customers, because some schools may be very easy to onboard, whereas others require additional customizations. So our customer engagement is, there's a standard sales and onboarding cycle. There's account management that never goes away. And then there's a support element where we try to have a partner support relationship, because just by nature of software as a service, there's a small percentage of end users that are always going to kind of be reaching out with questions. So we try to align from an account management and then a support effort long-term with these customers.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. I go to Dreamforce every year, and I talk to a lot of SAS and different types of folks in that industry. And it's so interesting seeing veterans that are involved in that. I mean, we don't deal with that at all in the military. There's no CRM. So you take your kind of military expertise, biometrics, all of that, you combine it with an industry expert in Velvet. But the rest of that stuff is learned. Like CRM is learned.
Yeah.
How to deal with inbound flow.
Yeah, but as an analyst, you work with databases all the time. So someone, spells their name a different way, and you're just looking at changing the vowels. You're going to databases to look it up. So when someone explains to me what Salesforce is, I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a database. So if we put quality information in now, a year from now, we'll be able to pull quality information out. So that's easy for me to champion that in the company. And we also have a gentleman named Eric McGee who we've brought on board recently. We've known Eric for a few years. He has a similar background to Velvet. He spent a lot of time in higher education, a little bit on the corporate side, but Eric set up the CRM at his last company, which was in the education space. So we benefited from him immensely. Day one when he started, he was working on getting Salesforce plugged in and tuned for us. So yeah, we're still learning about these tools. We had to go out and find help desk tools. So yeah, you're going out and you're pricing this stuff and trying to compare it. I ask people all the time, what tools do you use? Because I want to know, like, what are other people using, whether they're competitive or not. Because we want to provide industry standard quality.
Most of the veterans that I talk to and interview really do well at finding their weaknesses and plugging into either a network of folks or specific individuals or technologies that kind of fit those gaps. Were there any areas that you were like, I am super naive, I have a huge gap in knowledge, I got to hit the books and hit YouTube videos and learn as much as I can about this? And then kind of how'd you deal with that?
Yeah, we consistently try to bring in so like I don't want to surround myself necessarily. I want to work with veterans, but like it's not a good idea for me to go out and find a bunch of Intel analysts and bring them in, because we're all similar. So I think diversity is very, very important, and to kind of figure out what your weaknesses are, what your organization needs, and go out and find those people. So for me personally, I'm not strong with finance. I don't have a math background. I needed to learn a lot about kind of hiring and recruiting. A great deal of what I do is facilitating in our company and solving problems. And recruiting is a big part of that, going out and finding the right people to fit into these needs. Because early on, and just to be early on, you mentioned I was a CEO. I'm the COO. We do have a CEO, but that was something we had to go out and find. We went out and we hired a traditional CEO. His name is Brad Davis, and he's been phenomenal. Velvet and I very much look at ourselves as employees of the organization. And we have, at one time, you might have 5 responsibilities, but that doesn't work forever. So like I've stepped away from marketing, for example. Like it's a passion of mine and I'm very interested in it, but it's not something that I can do every day. And if you're not really focused on it over time, you don't do a good job. So we're consistently getting mentorship and feedback. The CTO we have now, he's taught me a lot about how to interact with engineering teams and how to make sure engineering and then sales teams have good relationships together. So yeah, it's been a constant challenge. I think organizational communication, the HR, the hiring piece, finance isn't a strong suit of mine, but having a CEO, having fractional CFOs help with that. So it's just a constant learning process for us.
So talk a little bit about, after you had kind of your seed round, kind of how you view investing, who your investors are, if you can share that, but talk a little bit about like how you viewed the investing piece of, looking to scale your business, and how they played a huge part in mentorship and also the capital intensive piece of that.
Yeah, it's It's interesting. That's also something that is a challenge, right? So I tell people now, and I've heard this from others, and I agree with it, and that's why I say it. Um, if you're going to raise money the first time, raise as much as you can. So people will tell you, don't take more money than you need. But I think you should, because when you don't need money, it's easy to get. And then when you need money, it's hard. You're already at a disadvantage just to start. And each subsequent round of funding that you raise is more challenging than the one prior. There's more barriers, there's more hurdles, you got to tell more of the story. And Velvet and I reached a point where raising funds takes you away from kind of the day-to-day or the tactical level in the business, and that's where I feel like I'm most effective. I have no problem kind of facilitating or thinking long-term, but I feel like I'm providing the most value when I'm here engaged with the company every day. And that was one of the reasons we brought in a traditional CEO, is to help us with the financial component of the business and make sure that everything looked normal as far as forecasting and, P&L statements and balance sheets. So you certainly want to take money from people that are interested in you and what you're doing, and there's a value add. So I would say that every person that has invested in our company has added value beyond the dollars that they put in, and that's very important. And then, our most recent round of funding included a traditional VC firm, but there's a limited partner in that firm that lives locally to us, and we're north of Charlotte in Huntersville, North Carolina. And he had met with Velvet and I for free for about a year on and off before we ever even started down the path of raising funds to this individual. So I know that he's interested in us genuinely. He mentored us, given us some good feedback. And then another recent addition was Task Force X Capital, which is, I believe, how we met through Brandon Shelton, the founder and managing partner. And Brandon, while I've only known him a short time, has done a lot. I mean, he's done everything he said he was going to do, and he's done it very fast. And I feel confident that if I ask Brandon for something, or I expose a problem, give me some ideas or give me some resources and introductions, he continues to do that. I'm actually, Brandon's coming in tomorrow. We're working on a project, he and our company. So I would say that not all dollar is equal, so get it from someone that is interested and is going to be around and is going to help move you forward. And then, it is challenging to raise funding, especially if you've got a team that you're leaving. We're leaving the office and leaving for an entire day, or sometimes a day and a half of travel, and it takes you out of things.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece. Having a founder and a founding team, and obviously, bringing in a CEO after that, and being able to still have those candid conversations with veteran VCs and non-veteran VCs, and being able to speak the language of, hey, this is how I used to talk in the military. I can talk to them like that. I mean, that's something that I hear all the time. It's like, it's just kind of a little easier to be able to speak the same language a little bit, but at the same time, you want to diversify both the capital, but also the conversation of folks that didn't necessarily do that.
Yeah, and in some ways, if you're dealing with a veteran, there's a familiarity that's there, whereas I may not know this person well, but maybe I've been around someone with similar personality types in the past, and that was certainly something else that I had to learn to navigate, as the non-veteran side of things, how to present myself, and the types of questions that may be asked. And now it's second nature, but like early on, cash flow positive, things like your burn rate. There's just common terms that people are going to expect you to know, and if you can't respond to that, you kind of look like you're not with it, or you don't have it together. And you may be aware of what those numbers are, but if you're not familiar with the terminology of the lingo, it can be a challenge. And it's a lot to remember, because now if you go and talk to someone that has a sales background, they might ask you, how many visitors to your website per month, or what's your customer acquisition costs, and so they're asking you a different set of information. And if you can't recall it immediately, that sometimes it's challenging.
That's a really good point, and it's something that getting the lingo straight and learning that terminology is something for anyone coming out of the military and going into the civilian sector, that is something that everyone deals with. But specifically when talking about investing and funding, those are a totally unique set of words, and they're a unique set of things that, and I saw Ramit Santi posted the other day that those are not normal words that people understand. So if those are on your website, and your customers or your users are seeing, they probably don't understand what churn rate is, or maybe they do, but those are different words that are specifically in your pitch deck or in whatever thing of how you're positioning yourself to investors. And it's not normal, and it is learned. And having those conversations, 100,000 times is how you get really comfortable with using them.
And if anything, someone from the military can appreciate is the use of acronyms and weird terms, because we come up with them all the time. And additionally, for us, that's a challenge, because if people don't necessarily want to hear that you're a startup, or you might not be around in a couple of years if they're getting ready to execute a 3 to 5 year contract with you. So that's not something that we're very public with. There's times when I didn't like us being referred to as a startup. I think we're a small technology company. We've got, for customers, you've got to grow beyond that point. But then at the same time, there's another story that you need to tell if you're going out and raising funding. Did you fight at all hey, you're just building something to sell it? Was that at all something that came up in your conversations? No, it doesn't, because I think the companies that are successful in our space have roots in education, and we do. Our co-founder is an educator, and I think our backgrounds complement each other. We have customers that are outside of traditional higher ed, and that will always be the case. But our bread and butter is higher education space, and you need to be authentic, I think, in any space that you're in. So we're in it for the long haul. We've lived it at different levels, and it's very easy for like Velvet and Eric McGee, for example, to have a conversation because they've been in those roles and they've been in their shoes. Of course I can talk to a potential customer or stay engaged, but I don't understand the lingo. I don't have that background. I get it over time, but I think if you're coming into any space to be a profiteer, especially a technology profiteer, and you think you're going to have hockey stick growth and hit a home run on every partner, that's going to sort itself out over time, unless you just taking the world on fire and your product's that great. But it's very relationship based, as it should be. So we have our roots in education, and as long as you keep the students' interests in mind, you make it easy for the faculty to use, and you offer a fair price for at an administration level, you'll be okay. And just try to focus on good customer service, a consistent product, and the rest of that stuff sorts itself out.
Military veterans are so mission driven. You really don't see as much of the wannapreneur, whatever the hell you want to call it, type folks. It's just not really something that you see as often. I mean, obviously, that sort of stuff is out there all the time, but even, going to conferences or going to different things, there's people who generally want to accomplish their mission or, work towards a positive goal and want their team to do the same thing. You don't see as much of, I want to start something just so I can sell it. And there's opportunities to do things, especially for veterans, that, hey, if you want to run a business on the side, you can do that. If you want positive cash flow on the side, you can do that. But the folks that we really see that are trying to build scalable businesses are focused on innovation and the mission of their company. And that's, by and large, it's just, I think that is a veteran-centric thing. You view mission as your primary focus and your guiding light. And that's not necessarily the case for a lot of other entrepreneurial groups. Yeah, and that went into us shutting down the marketing LLC. As ProctorFree took off, we needed to spend our time on what was important. So I don't take any money for that stuff anymore. If I'm doing it, it's all volunteer based, and I'm very involved to get kind of the servant or mission focus aspect. Outside of ProctorFree, I participate on the board of my local Chamber of Commerce, so I'm still able to stay involved, do some pro bono work, feel like I'm engaged with the community. But yeah, we live and breathe ProctorFree, and you can't be that. I'm working on 10 different business ideas person and expect it, in my opinion, to be successful. You really got to spend your time on what's important. And we certainly spend a lot of hours on ProctorFree, but we wouldn't have it any other way because we're seeing traction in the results. That's awesome. And so what's next? What's next on the kind of roadmap for ProctorFree? There's always product updates. So we've got a technology roadmap that extends out very far, and we just continually make sure the priorities are straight. So the product's going to continue to have new features updated. We'll have generational and version updates to that, growing within the higher education space, maybe establishing a couple different product lines over time. But right now, we just do a lot of blocking and tackling. We've got partnerships that we work very hard to maintain. So I would say that's it. My focus, I've kind of got a list of things that I know I'm going to be working on for the next 6 months. And if I accomplish them, the company will be in a better place. And I think we've all got these little lists of things to work on. So I'm just continuing to block and tackle. Yeah, that makes sense. So, ProctorFree.com, where can they find you on social media and otherwise?
LinkedIn and Twitter. I think my handle name is Generic Murphy, but I prefer that people just check out ProctorFree.com. If you know anyone in higher education or corporate learning, we always look for introductions and like to have conversations with people. Yeah, I'm just very thankful to be a part of this with Velvet Nelson and our CEO, Brad Davis.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in higher ed, check them out. I've heard nothing but great things. Really excited. Last question: how much do you get the Mike Murphy jokes from Lone Survivor?
I get it from people that are familiar with. Yeah, I hear it from time to time, but not as much as you'd think. Michael Murphy is a very common name, but yeah, occasionally it's brought up, and it's usually from someone that's been in the military, but not so much from civilians.
Well, after the movie came out, I'd imagine it's more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Mike, thanks. I appreciate it. If you're a veteran entrepreneur, definitely keep following ProctorFree and Mike's story. They're doing amazing things, and it's cool to be part of, seeing a veteran part of SAS and really innovating and changing the landscape. So thanks so much, and we'll check in soon.
Great. Thank you so much.